Hey, this is Sabrina Monarch of Monarch Astrology, bringing you the astrology forecast for May 13 to May 19 of 2020. And what I was focusing on for this week is a theme that comes up because of the earthiness of this week's transits. So we have the Sun in late Taurus trining Pluto and Jupiter in late Capricorn. And so this gave me an image of like really the fullness of Earth experience and a difference between feeling like stagnant or blocked, because that's, compact, full energy as well, or just feeling this juicy revelry of being connected to Earth and being connected to the body. And I want to give a shout out before we start to Tylin Mackenzie, who I did an astrology reading trade with. And I happened to have my moon in late Taurus, and what she said about it, I found very insightful. And she spoke of when a sign is in like the later degrees, that it's very full of that energy. And it's kind of like a cup filled all the way to the top of that sign. And so she was like, that's a lot of Taurus. And the way that she described it opened up a lot of insight for me. And it was a super brilliant reading in general. I felt so inspired by it and inspired by the energy that she put into the reading beforehand, of meditating on it and having visions and getting images, which is how I approach astrology readings as well. And her reading was so insightful that it changed my life. And this is what I love about the practice of astrology, is that we're finding these like pinpointing these very provocative and insightful statements that create change. And before we get into this week's forecast, and I'm focusing on how heavy the earth energy is, I want to acknowledge that by talking and by listening, we're really engaging the air element, which is the exchange of ideas through the ether. And in order to translate that over to the body, I would invite us to take some dramatic breaths. So making sounds and really feeling the breath kind of like this. Feels really good. So I'm going to get into my slides now. And actually, before I do that, I want to just say welcome to my channel if this is your first time here. And thank you for coming back if you are a returning reader and now listener. I've been writing these forecasts for 5 years now. June will be my 6th year. And I recently made the leap to getting onto YouTube and adding like a multimedia quality to these forecasts, and to hopefully also reach new people, because I understand that some people really prefer to get their information through sound and through video. And I've always been a reader and a writer, and so moving onto YouTube is a really big, expansive process for me, and I'm grateful for you being here with me. And if you want to follow me across social media platforms, do find me on Instagram at SabrinaMonarch and on Twitter at Sabrina_Monarch. And I'm also leaving the link for my mailing list in the notes, because this is how you can get the written version of the weekly forecast sent to you every week and be reminded or notified of these forecasts, and also be notified of my offerings and the evolutionary astrology intensive courses I teach. So I'm going to get into the forecast now and share my slides. Fullness, at capacity or a cup flowing over. And I chose this image of this very kind of empress looking woman, this as an image of being in the revelry state, the cup flowing over state, but in the earth element. So you see her kind of like lounging and relaxing into her physicality and the staff of flowers that she's carrying beside her. And this week, Jupiter stations retrograde in Capricorn, and the Sun in Taurus trines Pluto and Jupiter in Capricorn. These alignments occur in earth signs and at later degrees of their signs. So there is a fullness, a heaviness, and a thickness energetically. And with this, our attention comes to matters like the body, our finances, our physical and material possessions. And feeling earthy fullness can be one of feeling overstuffed, clogged up, stagnant, stuck. You have a lot of like physical items that you have to process. I know I have a bunch of stuff from my move in boxes, and I have to go through that, you know? Or it can be a kind of revelry in the sensual experience of life, in the senses, and really being able to touch and be intimate with something or some things that were once ideas, were once feelings, or once dreams. And now it's like, oh, like I can touch you, you're right here. And there's a cause for celebration when our physical life reflects a materialization of something that we cultivated or wished for. And so that can be really beautiful. The reality is that either of these full earth experiences are connected to each other. In order to cultivate a life of value and to experience the fullness that I speak of as revelry, we do have to give things up. Not all accumulation of material or energy is meant to stay. There is such a thing as waste and letting go. Yet sometimes in the very desire to have and to be full, to feel secure, like we hoard and hold on to what might be better to just let go of. And steadily, as we accumulate this level of clutter, we become less and less available to receive what we might actually desire or what might actually be fulfilling for us. Because we've clogged up our channels with this dead weight that we're clutching at. And this situation can be changed. And not always so simply through the mind. The mind can change pretty quickly, but things that we've compacted and held onto or stored in the body are often moved through the body. And as a metaphor, I can feel dismal about my room when it's messy. And I often do. When my room's messy, like I feel it. And I could do a bunch of mindset work around loving my room no matter what it looks like, and you know, just being happy where I am and all of that. And I could also just open the window and clean and put the things away and put out some fresh flowers and just move the energy in the space and move the energy on a physical level and feel much better. Similarly, we can reach blocks in our healing journeys and our personal evolution when we seek to create some kind of radical change or transformation in our lives, or let go of some old and ancient pattern. And we only seek to do it on the mental level. This is why I believe right now that the revolution is physical with Uranus and Taurus, great awakener Uranus in the earth sign of Taurus, and that we can experience new frontiers of possibility within ourselves when we explore our relationship with the esoteric mysteries of the body. What's our body really capable of that we don't even know yet? Things like learning how to clear conditioning or trauma from the body, learning how to feel safe, learning how to feel worthy and deserving where we do not, learning how to be more and more receptive to pleasure states without feeling like something bad is going to happen to equal out the good. There's a quality of homeostasis, right? Like we have a certain standard, and when things change, we bring them back into that homeostasis. So cultivating a new normal takes time and it takes engagement. Learning how to circulate the energy that we discover in pleasure states, how to circulate that through our bodies and through our whole lives, to be in touch with Eros and to circulate Eros into our lives. And while this fullness and heaviness of the moment is soon to begin to break up a little bit more as the sun in Taurus moves into Gemini, which is an air sign, We've still got a lot of earth element astrology to work with. Pluto and Jupiter in Capricorn for a bit. And Jupiter was, at the close end of Capricorn, and now it's retrograding, so it's going to be in Capricorn for a bit. And Uranus in Taurus for 5 more years, around 5 years. Uranus spends like around 7 years in each sign, and we're a little bit into the transit. So with this, I really invite you to consider the physical revolution and what steps you can take in your life to feel more connected to and empowered by sensuality and the fullness of earthly incarnate life. And the physical vessels are our bodies that ground us here and the ecosystems that we're a part of. To be honest, for me as a writer who's been working with language as my main vocabulary, I study embodiment. And even just getting on camera is a practice of being more embodied and learning how to express myself more through gesture and facial expression, which is an edge for me and vulnerable even to admit. But I spent so many years just kind of with my nose in books and thinking and really developing my capacity to use just the right word that I needed, and so now I'm kind of transferring that over to embodiment and expanding my body vocabulary. So as an aside, just thought I'd share that. Uranus brings surprises and awakenings. So perhaps you had, like me, the realization at one point in your life that you could talk to plants and actually get a response from them. And how do you do that? Well, I have a podcast with CC Sear on my podcast, Magic of the Spheres, where we talk about plant communication, and I'll leave that link in the notes. Or also, like me, maybe you had that realization that this is an enchanted universe and that you can talk to the planets or have a correlation, like experience where the planets are and feel how that's interacting with your own life, which is what I'm talking about in these forecasts, but that you can do it for yourself too when you learn the language of astrology. And this is why I teach astrology as well, because I really want to give you your own personal practice and give you the tools to connect with astrology for yourself at an intuitive level. And whether it's plants or planets or, whatever you're communing with, I'm just trying to say there's so much magic in this existence in store. And like Rilke, who has Pluto in Taurus, once said, believe in a love that is being stored up for you like an inheritance, and have faith that in this love there is a strength and a blessing so large that you can travel as far as you wish without having to step outside of it. I'll read that again. Believe in a love that is being stored up for you like an inheritance, and have faith that in this love there is a strength and a blessing so large that you can travel as far as you wish without having to step outside of it. I like to think of what it would be like to evolve and have a revolution of our relationship with ourselves, because we know that phrase, everywhere you go, you are. And if we love ourselves, if we have this juicy relationship with ourselves, if we feel self-esteem and acceptance and compassion and cultivation even for the parts of ourselves that we feel triggered by or we feel are hard to face, like when we can really be intimate with all aspects of ourselves and we really love ourselves, then everywhere we go, we are walking that inheritance. And we never step outside of it because we're always with ourselves. That's just how I'm interpreting the quote, but I invite you to also feel into what that might mean for you. So here's our week in more detail after a few announcements. The first is that I have a new episode of Magic of the Spheres out, and I interviewed fellow astrologer Maren Altman, and we spoke about creativity and cosmology. So we're speaking about what creativity is beyond like art making or a specific channel that we're putting it into, but what the process of manifestation is. And we also spoke of things like following your highest excitement. I really had a good time speaking with her, and I invite you to check out this episode and to check out the podcast. We're getting binge-worthy up in here with Magic of the Spheres, so go check that out. And then the Kickstarter announcement. I have a Kickstarter coming in June, and I will be crowdfunding the year ahead. So June marks my anniversary of beginning to write consistently, and it will be coming up on my 6th year. And this is my first time doing a Kickstarter. I'm going to be offering like astrology readings and discounted tuition to my course. And I'm asking for your help to crowdfund the year ahead because I really enjoy providing high quality, free content to the public. And I ask that you consider me like public radio, and that if you take, if you find these forecasts valuable, to support me in continuing to share them. I aim to continue to share content basically for my whole life. I don't know what my whole life has in store, and believe me, I can look at my transits up to a certain point and I get overwhelmed. What I remember, Neptune crossed my ascendant on my birthday this year, and I looked that transit up a few years ago and literally got full body chills. So I don't look too far into the future with my own chart. And this is, totally just an aside. What I'm saying is that I actually really think it's part of my nature to broadcast. I'm a channel. I meditate on things and I see these little lights that look like stars, and they help guide my ideas. And it brings me great joy and abundance to be this channel and to transmit the transmissions that are coming through me. And self-publishing has been a way that I don't have to edit my voice by any external constraints. All I've done is figure out how to communicate effectively and to reach the hearts of my audience. And so because I work for myself, I've been making my income mostly from astrology readings and teaching this astrology course, but I'm realizing that the work that I'm sharing on a weekly basis is really valuable, and I put so many hours and so much love into it. And so I would really love your help crowdfunding the next year. And so that's that. I will announce that to my mailing list. I'll be announcing that here. So stay tuned for that coming up in June. And here's our week. On May 14, 2020, Jupiter stations retrograde in 27 degrees of Capricorn at 7:32 a.m. Pacific. So Jupiter retrograde in Capricorn. And one thing that is significant about this station is that it means Jupiter will form 2 more conjunctions to Pluto and Capricorn. They did this conjunction in April of this year, and Jupiter will conjoin with Pluto again when it goes retrograde, and then again when it goes direct. And the exact dates for that are June 29 and November 12th of when those conjunctions will happen again. This has really been one of the characterizing transits of 2020 and will continue on for the year. So here are some things to consider. Capricorn is a yin earth sign and relates to the experience of contraction. And it's a sign associated with material and worldly success as well. And I'm going to get kind of heady for a moment, so bear with me. Materialization is itself a contraction. This is because materialization is a process by which infinite streams of energy, like, you can think of like the beams of sunlight just bathing Earth at all times. And then there's these plants that grow, and they are specific manifestations of that energy that has come into a particular form. So when we are imagining what we can do with our lives, there may be certain proclivities and natural limitations and parameters of, what's our essence, what we're here to do, there's limitations in this reality, but there's a lot of possibility as well. So there's this sea of possibility, and when we make choices, we narrow into particular streams of experience. And I offer another metaphor for this of like a house. And before we have the house, there's a plot of land, and there's some limitations. There's the size of the plot of land, and there's maybe like the normal conventions for what houses are and look like. But within those conventions and limitations, there's so many different possibilities, literally infinite possibilities of what that house can look like. And then once the house is built, there's going to be a particular experience inside of the house. Yet again, particular parameters and yet infinite experiences that can be had inside of it. And at the same time, when we're thinking about architecture, there's a different experience that happens inside of a courthouse that would happen inside of a residential house. And house metaphor aside, let's look at our life decisions as having a very similar quality. We might decide to go to a particular school, or we decide to, go straight into business and forget school and forget, do work with coaches or go to schools that aren't academic or whatever. Like, we're picking our path, and the choices that we make constrain our direction and define it. And why I'm sharing all of this is that Jupiter in Capricorn can relate to the possibility of being expanded by virtue of contraction. And there's a certain need for wisdom that we find with the Saturn and Capricorn archetypes, and Jupiter as well as a truth seeker. But thinking about the choices that we make, the contractions that we create from our choices, which ones give us some kind of expansion and which ones contract and limit us in a way that we don't find enjoyable. And yet, if we just want to be free and free form and never make any choices or commitments or attachments or whatever, that has consequences as well that we might not like either. So it's about picking something and picking something wisely. So on to another thing. The Jupiter-Pluto conjunction can be associated with the pandemic, the current pandemic, because it is the growth, Jupiter quality, of something that's causing destruction and decay, a Pluto quality, or transformation, also Pluto. And some people are experiencing this loss in a really direct way, like they have a career that's directly impacted and they can't go to work. And for some people, that's causing them to question their career path and if they want to do something new that they've always been wanting to do. And then other people are expanding or adapting in their career fields because of the shift. So just to presence, Jupiter-Pluto does relate to the current pandemic. There's this sense of great pause in the air. And regardless of whether this pause is felt subjectively as cataclysmic or refreshing, it's an opening to question what drives and motivates us and the way that we structure our lives, the values that we're loyal to, the big decisions and commitments we make that shape our lives. Again, taking infinite possibility and streaming it into a narrow channel. And to gain clarity on what truly matters to us and how exactly we are going to live in accordance with our deeper values through making decisions and choices that narrow the path in a way that we would like. And sometimes we don't have the bigger picture. Jupiter is about the bigger picture, but I think with this dynamic of Jupiter and Capricorn, as sometimes those really important decisions that you make where you're kind of in a tunnel and you feel at a deep intuitive level that it's the right thing to do, but you don't know how it's going to pan out. It's not like you have the big blueprint of exactly how things are going to go, but you're just doing the right thing. Maybe you're even making an impossible choice and you're doing the best that you can. So there can be that quality to it as well, of just feeling into the path, even if you can't see the light, even just a few steps before you. With this transit, there's also a magnification of doubt, and we might consider our relationship with doubt. Do we allow doubt in as a signal that there may be something important or missing? Does doubt guide us to ask better questions, to seek guidance from our deep inner knowing and from people we respect, and to actually make life-enhancing changes? But as a reverse, unrelenting doubt, a lack of ability to trust or have faith, is something that many people find virtuous, like a kind of vigilance to make sure that we're never fooled or nothing bad ever happens. I offer an invitation, if you can feel this energy living within you, to allow it to bend. For example, many of us have a great wish or desire that we also fear will never happen. It's not usually the case that we are able to change our minds in a magic instant, but we have to undergo a process of questioning the belief systems that our doubt is based upon, unraveling and releasing them, these beliefs, and adopting different beliefs that work better. This can be a process that happens over time. It's basically what people do when they're working with a mentor or a coach or undergoing some kind of transformational program, or when we're creating a new habit in our lives that goes against the grain of our previous identity. We have to have faith, right? We don't have reference points that it's going to work. And faith is a process that allows things to happen. It doesn't make it easy per se, but it allows. It could make it easy. Depends. I just really love this image for thinking about like Taurus and Capricorn, like Pluto energy of like food and this kind of like Pluto kind of vibe energy that I'm feeling. But I also like that this album is called Are You Experienced? I feel like that's such a Jupiter and Capricorn question to ask. Are you experienced? If the union of Jupiter and Pluto is magnifying decay as one of its possibilities, this energy can be collaborated with by working to clear the psychic overgrowth of our limiting beliefs or the beliefs we formed about life due to past traumas. So offering something up. Additionally, there may be some fruits, revelations, downloads, ripening of consciousness, however you want to imagine it, that come from spaces of deep pause and rest, or spending time outside, or doing things that are just for the sake of play without an agenda. Like what good sleep does to regenerate the body, wakeful activities where we are unplugging and unhooking from the routine pressures and burdens of life have a similar regenerative effect. So try it out and see what happens. I have to remind myself to do that basically every day. And it's an intuitive, I work from home and I have for, before the pandemic as well. And so my workflow involves working and then also taking breaks whenever I want to go take a bath or go outside, or move my spine and do like cat cow or shake or whatever. So even those like little activities that I'm doing just to like keep myself going through work, it's another one to even just like go outside, go on an adventure and unplug. And I noticed that doing that really restores me at a level that is kind of like sleep, but you're awake. And it's an intention and a practice, I think, to unhook or unplug from the monkey mind of what we have to do, what our chores are, like all that kind of thing, and just be. And then later this day, let me check what day it is again. May 14, we're on May 14. The sun in 24 degrees of Taurus will trine Pluto in 24 degrees of Capricorn at 11:49 p.m. Pacific. I think that this image, I have all the art credited on the written version of this forecast, but I think this one is called like ethereal or like intangible caresses or something. I really like this one. So Sun-Pluto contacts relate to transformations of self that occur by witnessing someone who we find compelling, charismatic, or who possess traits that we are mesmerized by or deeply attracted to. This is important. So Pluto relates to energy exchange and transformation, and the sun is someone's light or radiant energy. And there's basically two different ways this can go. There can be the experience of jealousy and disempowerment, and like, oh, like that person's light is so bright, I can't take it, it makes me feel shame. Or a sense of, this person is in my field, I'm being sparked by their existence. What inside of me is wanting to be activated? For me, like when I first started writing astrology forecasts and was on a mission to have this be my career, I listened to a lot of business and entrepreneurial podcasts and just like soaked up and absorbed the inner workings of the minds of all these different business people. By listening to podcasts, it was like the unmistakable creative that I liked to listen to back then. And just considering like loosening the boundary between me and them, and feeling that I could listen to and hear them and then discover those qualities in myself is a much different experience than feeling triggered or feeling jealous. I still have my jealousy points, of course, with things that maybe feel harder for me to access. And even so, those are some of the most important places to remember or resource this about the difference between jealousy or being inspired. So at a low level with Sun Pluto, this can relate to jealousy or envy, feeling disempowered by another person's existence, their radiant essence. And just seeing them shine hurts to look at because it puts us in touch with shame of what we feel we don't have or who we feel we are not. And in some cases, a response to feeling triggered by other people's talent or gifts is to want to basically draw the blinds and keep the light away, and to isolate oneself from the influence that's causing this level of distress. And at certain times in one's development, and we actually talked about this in the podcast with Marin this week about isolation and creative process. At certain points in development, this can be really a way to discover one's own creativity and one's own energy. We're speaking of the sun in Taurus here, and Taurus likes to keep things simple. Taurus can relate to like not engaging with extraneous external influence, being more of a hermit. And when we do that, we can kind of feel into our own energy and our own flavor, if you will, and really cultivate something. And sometimes we need to do this, like, again, with astrology as a metaphor, like when I first was writing horoscopes, not forecasts, but I wrote horoscopes for all the sun signs, I would write out all these graphs of like where the planets were falling in what houses based on people's rising sign. And it was very tedious and kind of unnecessary in the sense that there were definitely programs or technologies that could have done it for me, but I wanted to feel it. So it would be kind of like learning how to write for yourself instead of just being like, well, other people, and I mean like actually physically write, like learning how to do that versus being like, well, other people do it, so they can just do it. Taurus, in a sense, likes to reinvent the wheel so that they can own the wheel and not just have it out there, but like have an intimate relationship with it. So we can be in places sometimes with our creativity where we do want to do the hard work. We want to reinvent the wheel. We don't want to take shortcuts, just so we can really grow a deeper sense of ownership of our own capacities. And then yet at other places of one's development. And so I'm inviting you to consider which is more relevant for you, that sense of isolation or a sense of collaboration and merging with others. At other places in one's development, being able to be in the company of other people's creativity and to be influenced by it is a growth edge. And law of attraction teachings often state that if we're contracting or cringing or feeling angst at another person's success, and I'm speaking of success here, but you can insert any other adjective or quality, a noun, that you would like. But I'm thinking success because Pluto and Capricorn, and that's the image that came to mind. But if we're feeling cringy at another person's success, but we want success, we're not being magnetic to that energy. So if there's something that we really desire in ourselves, learning how to feel empathic joy for other people who exhibit those traits is a way to become more magnetically in alignment with having those traits within ourselves. And so part of the power struggles between Sun Pluto is like, you're creative and I'm not, and thus I feel disempowered by you, versus like, what if that power struggle wasn't there? What if we actually just enjoyed the environment around us and the brilliance of the beings around us, and felt that we at a deeper level, because of our feeling activated or feeling inspired, that we're actually being provoked by our environment to touch a part of ourselves. And the question is how cultivated this part of ourselves is, and how we can either cultivate that in our own company or when we collaborate with someone else. You know, for me personally, like another example is with cooking. I read cookbooks like cover to cover only because someone who I cooked a lot with, who is a chef, told me that he did that. And I never thought, like, who does that? Read cookbooks to cover. But I like absorb and I eat and devour the cookbook, and then I have new skills for cooking. Similarly, when I watch other people cook, I'm fascinated because they give me ideas that I wouldn't have come up with myself, and then I copy them. So it's like, I think, however, you know, with writing, I copied a lot of styles of authors when I was growing up. I had, you know, read Anais Nin and it changed my life, Anais Nin. And I would practice like their voice until I found my own. So there's a way that we do, even though Taurus is all about self-reliance and, you know, our own energy, we're still in conversation with the things in the environment around us. And yeah, I'll just leave it at that. Remember that the sun relates to both talent and generosity. And one of the gifts of the sun is that its boundless generosity helps things grow. Often in the process of having a particular talent, and we're speaking of Sun Pluto here, so we have talent, Sun, and Pluto power. So these are where I'm sourcing these meditations. In the process of having a particular talent, a person might wield it as a weapon, intimidating other people with it, and enjoying being the best or the brightest in the room at the expense of others. And yet, at a deeper level of generosity and empowerment, you know, if we need to be the best, there's a sense of not actually being, having one's self-esteem sourced from within. It's dependent upon the external in a way that makes it a power game when it doesn't actually have to be. But at a deeper level of actual empowerment and generosity, a person may have a more loving relationship with the environment around them. It's one thing to exude personal power and use it as a weapon, and another to exude personal power and use it as a vehicle to uplift other people. Though at the end of the day, everyone will have their own response to other people's energy, which is why taking up space and shining and being yourself in this reality involves the capacity to not be overly hindered by not being liked or approved of by everyone. Endlessly fascinating to think about the sun and how it's connected to one's radiant essence and how beings respond to the sunlight, if they flower in it or if they go and hide. And similarly, when we are ourselves, some people like it and some people don't. To what degree is that a power struggle? There may be a growing awareness at this time as well of the impact that some of our natural gifts and talents, which are blind spots to us, have on others. Validation and feedback need not be only something that we receive unsolicited. If you're feeling insecure, try asking people who have your best interests at heart what they like about you, that you want some reflection. It's a vulnerable thing to do, and often people will be happy to love you. I think of it kind of like cats are happy to kind of like flop over and be like, pet me. And do we have needs to be pet? And do we ask for that? Like, hey, I need a boost. Can you tell me what you like about me? It's really sweet and really vulnerable, right? So then May 15, Mercury in 8 degrees of Gemini sextiles Chiron in 8 degrees of Aries at 1:22 p.m. Pacific. And there may be a subtle magic here around the courage to try new things or to explore new vantage points, which is the Mercury and Gemini side of it, especially if the edge is that one feels inferior, which is a Chiron in Aries, like the wound or the pain point of Aries is like, I'm so new, like I feel inferior, the inferiority complex. So to try new things in places that we feel inexperienced in these arenas. And because of the gentleness of the sextile aspect, it's unlikely that this subtle opening that this transit represents could be a pressing concern. It may show up more as a desire to do something you've long wanted to do, but continue to put off because there's an excuse like it's hard, I don't know how to do it, other people do it better, I should just focus on what I'm already good at, etc. And the new opportunity is an attitude of why not today? And May 17, 2020, and this is an image of, I believe, Dante and Virgil entering purgatory. This is on May 17, the sun in 27 degrees of Taurus will trine Jupiter in 27 degrees of Capricorn at 9:40 a.m. Pacific. So the first image that came to me was cleaning out the bottom of a trash can or compost bin. So first image that came to me when I was meditating on this alignment, cleaning out the bottom of a trash can or a compost bin, or otherwise doing some chore involving something especially gnarly. Perhaps as an activity, this is literally a way of being with the transits. Of course, this could happen at a psychological level, rooting out some deep ancient pattern and releasing it through the mind, through the emotional body. But I like the physical example because such tasks are like energy work on a physical space and have a way of moving and clearing energy on all levels, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, etc. One of Taurus's deeper evolutionary qualities is the development of self-esteem. And like our trash can or compost metaphor, not all aspects of self are things we particularly like. And yet, what is our process for being with all of it? And what hard or unpleasant things do we do as an act of self-love? Maybe tracking where our money is coming from and going, is something that feels triggering to us. We don't want to look at it, but we know it's our growth edge. And so we're learning about managing money. So we do it. We track where the money is coming and going. Whatever the thing is for you, there can be a correlation this week between doing the hard thing and feeling self-esteem and gratification as a result. So those are our transits this week. I would love to hear what this forecast made you think of, how your week is going, any thoughts you want to share. Leave a comment. I'll get back to you. And Subscribe to this channel. I'm like, I know I needed to tell you something. Subscribe to this channel, and I'm leaving links in the notes about my mailing list and all of that. And you can find me on my social media platforms as well. I really hope that you enjoyed this and found this stimulating and inspiring in some way. And please do let me know what it sparked for you and how you're doing in the comments below. And I'll catch you next week.